Hi guys, before we get into today's episode of Rewriting Minecraft Diaries, I just wanted to let you know that I will be sharing resources that I found to support the people in Minneapolis with the ongoing ICE protests, as well as resources for the families of those who have been affected by the ongoing ICE raids in the description of this video. You might not know this if you've only watched my AFMAL content, but my mom's side of the family is from Ecuador. My mom is an immigrant from Ecuador. My grandparents immigrated from Ecuador. So this has always been very personal for me, but even if it wasn't, I would still be talking about this because I care about basic human rights. Yes, this is supposed to be a fun little video where I talk about my Minecraft Diaries rewrite, but you don't get to comfortably engage with my content when there are people who have been and are being ripped from their families, people who look like my cousins, my uncles, my aunts, my grandparents, or when the people who are trying to help them and protect them are being shot and left to die in the streets. I want to make it abundantly clear where I stand. This is not a safe space for ICE apologists or racists or xenophobes. I am not going to debate basic human rights with you. And if that makes you want to unsubscribe, good. Get the fuck off my page. I do not want you here. Once again, I will be sharing resources in the description. They will be labeled accordingly. Look out for each other, keep your eyes on Minnesota, stay safe, and in case it wasn't already clear enough, fuck ICE. Abolish ICE now. Hello friends, what's up? It's Jaime here. Welcome back to another episode of Rewriting Minecraft Diaries. As a veteran Minecraft Diaries fangirl and former theorist who has never moved on from anything in her life, I decided that I wanted to create an outline for how I would rewrite Minecraft Diaries. The playlist for this series is linked down below in case you want to get caught up. Last episode was about the Ruan region with all of its villages and notable locations. That episode was meant to serve as an overview of the Ruan map, which we will expand on in the following episodes. But before we expand on those locations in today's episode, I'm going to talk about all of the different races and magical beings that make up the world of Minecraft Diaries. So humans, werewolves, Meifwas, elves, so on and so forth, because I think it's important to reestablish who makes up the world of Minecraft Diaries. So I'm going to talk about their basic physical traits, the relationships that these races and magical creatures have to each other, as well as their magical abilities or capacity to learn magics if they are able to do so, if they have magics. Now, this is usually the part of the video where I do a note section to help cover the blind spots that I might have missed in the previous episode or episodes, but because basically every episode that comes after this one will be about expanding on the lore and the characters of the locations that I talked about in the last episode, I don't really feel the need to do a note section this time, but I will do so for the following episodes. Instead, I want to take this time to potentially be the bearer of some bad news. Today's episode is obviously the first episode of Rewriting Minecraft Diaries for this year. Happy New Year! But I will be putting this series on an official hiatus after this episode comes out. Not for too long. This series will resume in May of this year. But the reason why I wanted to put this series on an official hiatus is so that I can try to minimize the amount of unofficial hiatuses. I really want to try to get ahead and give myself some more time to work on these episodes so that I'm not scrambling and having to push them back for weeks in order to get them out. When I first started the series, I severely underestimated how much time it takes to put these episodes together. For a little perspective, it usually takes a minimum, like a minimum of 2 weeks for me to put these episodes together. And sometimes that's not even including if there are extenuating factors that prevent me from working on the episode, like me getting sick or getting scheduled for extra shifts at my job. So, long story short, these episodes take a long time to make. The episodes themselves, and then just like the extenuating circumstances that I am faced with in my everyday life. And so I want to give myself a little bit of a head start so that I can attempt to go back to releasing these episodes monthly which was my original plan when I started this series. I can't always promise that I will succeed because life has a habit of derailing my best laid plans, but I can promise that I'm always going to do my best to put out the best episodes that I possibly can for you guys. So TLDR, this series will return in May of this year, so that I will hopefully have plenty of time to make the upcoming episodes the best that they can possibly be. Now, without further ado, let's get into the video. Alright, we are going to start with the humans. This is the race that obviously needs the least amount of explaining. Humans in the Minecraft Diaries world come in all shapes and sizes, all kinds of skin tones and features. This is something that I really want to prioritize in this rewrite. I want to be more intentional with the diversity in the skin tones and the body types for the characters that we know and love, but also the original characters that I create for this rewrite. So that is definitely something that I'm taking into a lot of consideration with the character designs. I know that I've said that I'm going to hold off on talking more in depth about character designs until later in this series, but if there are significant changes to a character from the original series, I will let you guys know when I reintroduce them. So humans make up the majority of the Ruan region. There are humans in Galruk and Tula, of course, but the largest human population is in Ruan. Even though Ruan has become more diverse over the centuries, especially since Irene's time, humans are still the dominant race. All of the big villages in Ruan are led by humans, and even though many of these villages do have other non-human races or magic users living in them, human relationships to the non-human races and magics users really differs depending on where in Ruan you are. For example, Okassis and Naraka village are pretty well known for being very racist towards Meifwas. Okassis more so, but things aren't exactly amazing for Meifwas in Naraka either. But then in Levis and plenty of other villages, Meifwas are welcomed. Then you also have Picaro village that hates witches, wizards, warlocks, and magics users in general. But Brightport, on the other hand, is very welcoming of Magic's users. It definitely helps, though, that their current lord is a Magic's user, but then also in Brightport, they have a long history of conflict and discrimination against werewolves, especially the werewolves of the Southern Werewolf Pack. So again, these relationships really fluctuate and differ depending on where in Ruan you are. And then as far as Magic's is concerned, humans do have the ability to do magics. Not all humans are born with magics, of course, but many are. There are human magics users, human witches and wizards, and human warlocks, but it's important to note that magics users, witches, wizards, and warlocks are not exclusively human. Magics is not exclusive to humans. There are humans who can do magics, but to be any kind of magics or witchcraft user is not an inherently human trait. Next, we have the werewolves, otherwise known as lupine, this race of humanoid wolves. In the world of Minecraft Diaries, there are two types of werewolves. First, you have the full-blood werewolves. Full-blood werewolves are therianthropic hybrid wolves that do not possess an actual human form, but they do have human-like qualities. They can talk like humans. Some opt to stand and move around on their hind legs as opposed to being on all fours. And then you also have the half-human werewolves. These are the werewolves that make up the majority of the werewolf population in the Minecraft Diaries world. These are the werewolves who started out as humans. Either they were born from a human parent and a werewolf parent, or they were completely human and they were bitten by a werewolf and transformed into a werewolf after surviving the bite. Regardless of how they started out, half-human werewolves have a human form and are able to transform from human to werewolf and vice versa. Some can do so at will. However, not all half-human werewolves can control their transformations. Werewolves are known for having heightened emotions, especially anger, and sometimes werewolves will transform if they're in a very heightened emotional state. Other werewolves who don't have full control over their transformations, especially werewolves who were just turned, will have their transformation triggered by a full moon's light. Werewolves originate from Ruan, where most werewolves worship a deity known as the lunar goddess. There are werewolves that live in Galruk and Tula, but the largest werewolf population in the world of Minecraft Diaries is in Ruan. As I mentioned in the last episode, werewolves live in villages with their packs, generally led by an alpha, but not always, and the established packs of Ruan are located in different parts of the region. Werewolves are known for being extremely territorial and are often in conflict with other werewolf packs and human villages over territory. Another common conflict that werewolves have with each other from pack to pack is over religion, because even though werewolves primarily worship the lunar goddess, there are differing practices and beliefs from pack to pack, which causes conflicts between them. Conflicts over territory and religion are also the most common ways that humans' discrimination towards werewolves manifests. Humans will often utilize stereotypes about werewolves being overly aggressive, bloodthirsty monsters to justify their wars with werewolves. Though there are humans who are trying to establish peaceful relationships with werewolves, like Lord Ben of Brightport. Werewolves are also often in conflict with Meifwas, but as I'll explain in the next section, the conflict between werewolves and Meifwas is a lot less prominent and a lot less violent than the conflicts that they have with humans and other werewolves. Their conflicts are usually a lot more subtle. Now, as far as the other races of the Minecraft Diaries world go, werewolves aren't exactly cool with them, but they don't have really any other explicit conflicts with them either, as long as they stay out of each other's way. Now, while not a trait inherent to werewolves, there are werewolves who do have the ability to do magics, although there aren't very many werewolves who practice magics in the modern era. There's a lot more to say about werewolf culture with the hierarchies and their religious and magics practices, but I'm gonna save that for the werewolf episodes that I have planned down the line. Alright, next we have the Meifwas. Meifwas, or cat people, are a humanoid species with feline traits. So cat ears, cat tails, claws, fangs, and they also have other cat-like traits, including being able to jump high, being excellent climbers, and a general disdain of water. I'd also like to note that natural-born Meifwas, generally speaking, have natural colored fur. However, Meifwas who were turned into Meifwas by means of a curse or a potion tend to have different colored fur. It's not impossible for the opposite to happen, but this is just the most common way that those traits manifest. So Meifwas originate from Tula, where most Meifwas worship the sun as a deity, in contrast to werewolves who worship the moon. The largest Meifwa population is in Tula, but there are some Meifwas who live in Ruan and Galruk. But it really isn't until later in the story with the rise of the King of Tula that you'll really see Meifwas leaving, or really fleeing, Tula in such big groups. Now, I do feel the need to address a bit of an elephant in the room. As you guys probably remember, Meifwa culture in the world of Minecraft Diaries in the original was previously inspired by real-world Japanese culture with the Japanese honorifics and the maid cafes. I'm not entirely sure if I'm gonna keep all of this though, to be honest. I'm still gonna have Nana have her maid cafe, but other than that, I don't know if I'm gonna keep the honorifics, or this isn't really Japanese culture, but the speaking in third person or that kind of thing. I need some more time to think about it. I'll obviously let you guys know what I end up deciding, but yeah, so that's my current stance on that, and that I don't really have a definitive stance one way or the other. I just need some more time to ponder on that. Anyway, Meifwas have very different relationships to the races of the world, depending on where in the world of Minecraft Diaries you are. In Tula, Meifwas are native to the region. They are the majority. There are Meifwas in governing positions, Meifwas of all different economic and social classes. But in Ruan, discrimination towards Meifwas is very common. It's not consistent throughout the entire region, but when you have powerhouse villages like Okassis and Naraka Village, which, as I mentioned before, are very well known for being racist towards Meifwas, those same prejudices, which are mostly targeted towards the Meifwa's faith in the sun goddess, those same prejudices are carried by a lot of humans throughout the region. Meifwas are also often in conflict with werewolves, especially the werewolves of Ruan. This is really more of a conflict between Meifwas and werewolves that are explicitly from Ruan, whereas Meifwas in Tula don't exactly love the werewolves in Tula, but there's a lot less explicit hostility between them. Meifwas in Ruan really try to steer clear of werewolves if they can. Their conflicts are often over religious differences. Otherwise, Meifwas don't really have like explicit beef with the other races and magical beings of the world. Like with humans or any other race that is able to do magics, there are plenty of Meifwas who practice magics, but magics is not an inherently Meifwa trait. But there are Meifwa magics users. Most Meifwas believe that their magics are derived from their sun goddess, even for those Meifwas whose magics have nothing to do with the sun. Okay, next we're going to talk a bit about magics users. Because magics, as I have stated throughout this video, isn't exclusive to one race, it's more accurate to describe magics users as a class. Magics in the world of Minecraft Diaries is a very broad subject. There are all different kinds of magics. Some magics are more nature and environment based. There's healing magics, mind manipulation magics, animation magics, like with bringing things to life. I am planning on doing a full episode about all the different kinds of magics down the road, but just know for now that there are all kinds of magics in the world of Minecraft Diaries, and as we go through the following episodes, we will encounter many different kinds of magics users. Because anyone of any race can be a magics user, the feeling towards magics really just depends on where in the world you are and that village's attitude towards magics. For example, magics is generally accepted and celebrated in villages like Phoenix Drop, Brightport, and Scaleswind. But then you also have the elves of the Yggdrasil Forest who view magics as a disruption to the balance of nature and forbid the practice of it. And then you also have Picaro Village, where all magics and witchcraft are feared and forbidden, which is really because people can't tell the difference between them and lump all magics and witchcraft users together. Sometimes even going as far as to ban families of magics and witchcraft users out of fear that they will have the same powers. Now, magics and witchcraft can be hereditary, but this is not always the case. A magics user can have completely non-magical parents, and two magics users can have a completely non-magical child. A magics user is more likely to have a child with magics, and the same goes for non-magics users, but it's not guaranteed either way. And then for magics users, just because they have a child who then has magics, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that their child will have the exact same magics as them either. Alright, next we're going to talk about witches and wizards. Just like with magics users, witchcraft is not exclusive to one race, it's a class, not a race. What separates magics from witchcraft, at least in this rewrite, I don't know if we ever got clarification from the original series, so this is just my definition for the purposes of this rewrite. Magics and witchcraft are both technically magic. Both have to do with special powers that are innate to their user. However, I don't know if this is the best analogy, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Magics is more like exercising, whereas witchcraft is more like cooking. All magics users have raw power, but being able to wield this power with control and precision requires them to train their bodies and their minds. Their magic is like a muscle that can get stronger over time. Witchcraft users have that same raw power as well, but in order for them to cast their spells or create potions, they require actual ingredients, parts from plants, animals, people. Witchcraft is about having the right combination of ingredients and calculating the proportions of those ingredients and then combining that with the user's innate magical power. It's like how in the Mighty Nine, which I love so much and watched recently, so it's on my mind, Caleb requires components for his spells. It's magic with extra steps. So even though there are similarities to magics, witchcraft and magics are two different things, and magic users and witchcraft users often get offended when they are confused for the other. There's a general rivalry between magics and witchcraft users, but it doesn't usually, anyway, reach full-blown hatred. Now, it's important to note that witchcraft is much more stigmatized in the world of Minecraft Diaries than magics is. This is mostly due to Irene being revered as this goddess, partially due to her magics, and because Irene is so widely worshipped, most people make the association that magics are good. There are exceptions, of course, but magics is generally viewed more positively, whereas witchcraft is often viewed as fundamentally evil and nefarious. Witches especially experience the brunt of this stigma. There's a lot of negative stereotypes about witches being creepy and obsessed with death, and that they kill people to use their organs for spells and potions, which isn't even remotely true for the vast majority of witches, of witchcraft users in general. But sadly, these beliefs about witches have been around since Irene's time, which we will talk in more detail about in future episodes. Next, we're going to talk about Warlocks. Once again, just like with magics users and witchcraft users, Warlocks are a class, a subclass really, of witchcraft. Anyone, anywhere, Ruan, Galric, Tula, can become a Warlock. Now, what distinguishes a Warlock from witches and wizards specifically is that Warlocks are practitioners of dark demonic witchcraft. Also, before you ask, this is just the definition that I'm going with for this rewrite, just in case you're wondering why this classification of warlocks doesn't match the one in other media with warlocks. Now, due to their practice of demonic witchcraft, warlocks tend to adopt demonic features and traits like horns and discolored skin, which they can then pass down to their children if they have them. Warlocks are generally feared by all. They are what people who don't know the difference between witches, wizards, and warlocks think that they are all like. They just kind of lump them all together when really warlocks make up such a small fraction of the general witchcraft user population. Witches and wizards don't necessarily fear warlocks as much as they despise them, especially for witches, because they face the most blatant discrimination due to people's fear of witchcraft, because there's that fundamental misunderstanding and ignorance of what witchcraft really is. A lot of people think that witchcraft is inherently evil, like I was saying in the last section. But if you're thinking of evil, or really dark witchcraft is really the more accurate descriptor, it's warlocks who practice that kind of witchcraft. This is the kind of witchcraft that really deals with death and the manipulation of people's and animals' minds and bodies. But we will talk so much more about the ins and outs of this kind of witchcraft when we talk about the infamous demon warlock. Alright, next we're going to talk about the elves. Elves are a humanoid race with their most distinct features being their long pointed ears. And while not a physical, appearance trait, another distinct feature that elves have is that they are immortal. If there is no intervention, elves can pretty much live forever. Across the three regions of Ruan, Galric, and Tula, most elves originate from their respective regions' sacred forest. For example, the elves in Ruan come from and are native to the Yggdrasil forest, When we get to talking about Galruk and Tula, I'll talk more about their sacred forests, but just know that they do have them. It's possible for elves to be born outside of these forests, and there are plenty of elves who leave their forests and live elsewhere, but you're going to find that most elves live within these sacred forests. This is because the elven societies in the Minecraft Diaries world generally prefer to be isolated. They keep to themselves and they don't interfere with the affairs outside of their forests. They don't really consider themselves as being a part of their respective regions. For example, the Yggdrasil elves will often say that they are from the Yggdrasil forest, not that they're from Ruan. And the reason why most elves generally view themselves this way is because they see themselves as protectors of their forests, protectors of the balance of nature, and they will only intervene in matters outside of their forest if they feel like nature itself is being threatened. Most elves that remain in their forests their whole lives have a general distrust towards humans, werewolves, Meifwas, basically anyone who is outside of their forest, but elves who have left their forest generally have better relationships with the other races. However, the one race that elves generally get along with regardless of where they are the fairies. I'll be talking more about the fairies very shortly, but just so that you know, fairies in the Minecraft Diaries world also originate from each region's sacred forest. But unlike the elves, fairies are a lot more casual about coming and going as they please, so they often are the elves' source of information for what is going on in the world outside of their forests. The fairies help keep the elves in the loop in exchange for all kinds of favors. The elves and the fairies have a pretty good cohabitation relationship, despite the fact that elves and fairies generally have very different approaches to the world, especially with magics. It varies from region to region, but most elves are of the opinion, or their leaders, I should say, that having access to that much power will disrupt the natural order of the world. The Yggdrasil elves are definitely the most strict about and like the most against practicing magics, unless it is for the sake of the forest. Most elves have the ability to do magics, but it's more of a policy thing that depends on whether they practice. A lot of elves are of the opinion that no one should be able to wield that much power, that magics only corrupts. But we will talk a lot more about the elves that are the exceptions throughout this series. Okay, next we have the fairies. If you have been following me for a while, then you probably know that I've been developing an original story about humans and fairies called Mission to Martius. The fairies in that story are very different from the fairies in this story, and I wanted to make sure that there were distinct differences between the fairies in Mission to Martius and the fairies in the world of Minecraft Diaries for this rewrite. So, fairies in this story are a race of tiny humanoid creatures with human-like features. Their most notable features are their wings that illuminate a bright white, but not so bright that it's blinding, light, and their pale blue skin. In the original Minecraft Diaries, fairies were depicted as these little blue sprites. My explanation for that is that that is just how fairies look in a Minecraft context, and that if you zoomed in, you would be able to see their faces and arms and legs and all that. So like I said before, fairies in the Minecraft Diaries world originate from the sacred forests of their respective region. So just like the Yggdrasil elves, fairies in Ruan come from the Yggdrasil forest. However, like I also said before, fairies are way more casual about coming and going from the forest as they please. Some fairies choose to stick to their forest or like the general area, but most travel all over and live in plenty of other places outside of their forest of origin. Fairies love flowers and floral scents and can become easily distracted by said flowers and floral scents, which can often leave them vulnerable to attacks or capture by humans and other creatures. But fairies are also known for being very playful and mischievous and enjoy playing pranks on humans, whether that's stealing their belongings or locking them out of their houses or eating their foods. Fairies generally steer clear of direct interactions with other races and creatures due to a general fear of being attacked or captured for the pranks that they play. But like I talked about before, they do have generally good relationships with elves, especially the elves that share their forest of origin. Fairies do have magics, though their magics are generally limited to nature-related spells. They can grow flowers and other plants and crops. They can speak to plants and animals. Some really powerful fairies can affect the weather around them. But yeah, all of their magics really has to do with nature. Alright, next we're going to talk about the imps. Imps in the Minecraft Diaries world are these reddish little demons with small white horns and yellow eyes and wings. Other defining features include their large noses and little teeth that I assume are supposed to be fangs. So there are two known ways for imps to spawn in the Minecraft Diaries world. Most imps spawn naturally in the nether. They usually originate from the nether. Others spawn in the overworld in places that have been abandoned or at the sites of tragic events. And some are summoned through rituals by witches, wizards, or warlocks. The most notable example of the latter is the demon warlock, who has summoned numerous imps that are fully under his control and act as his minions on Ishmael, though it is important to note that most imps aren't controlled by a master. Imps, despite their demonic origins, are not inherently evil. They are more so mischievous and chaotic. Many enjoy pulling pranks on humans and other creatures by disguising themselves. Imps are able to disguise themselves as any creature, but they are limited to what they can see. They aren't able to make up the appearance of someone or something that they haven't seen. There are also imps who simply crave connection with humans and other creatures and will take the form of humans and attempt to live amongst them, though they're usually a bit socially awkward and sometimes lack understanding of human social cues. This and the fact that they have to copy the appearance of someone that they've seen often gets them into trouble when their true identities are discovered. Most humans fear or despise imps due to their demonic origins, with the exception of witches, wizards, and warlocks, which is kind of sad, honestly, because the imps that try to live amongst humans generally don't mean them any harm. They just want to be friends. But so the imps that are summoned by witches and wizards or warlocks are generally pretty loyal to those who have summoned them. Besides their ability to take on others' appearances, imps don't really have other magical abilities, but despite their small statures, they are quite sturdy and pretty decent fighters, and with their wings, they're able to fly. All of these features combined make them pretty good spies, as the demon warlock has often used his imps for. Next, we're going to talk about the wyverns. Wyverns are sentient draconic creatures with two wings, two legs. They also have long beaks and fin-like ears. Wyverns can be all sorts of vibrant colors, but many of them are golden. Wyverns originate from the wyvern realm that was originally open for wyverns to come and go into the overworld as they pleased, usually for food. Although even when the realm was open, wyverns typically did not reside in the overworld, because even before the human wyvern war, wyverns did not like to involve themselves with human affairs or matters of the overworld at large. The wyverns were perfectly content with coexisting with the people of the overworld. That is, until Shad, as the Shadow Lord, began killing wyverns in droves and framed the humans for it, thus successfully invoking the wrath of the wyverns and starting the human wyvern war. This war was long, with heavy losses on both sides. As you might recall from my episodes on the Divine Warriors, Irene eventually learned to communicate with the wyverns and convince them to stand down. But by the time she was able to do so, the humans had already committed to eradicating the wyverns, and they were forced to seal themselves away in their realm. It was the elder wyverns who made the decision to close the portals for good. Now there are only a handful of wyverns remaining in the overworld. these are the children of a wyvern named Gaia. Considering that there was an entire massive war between the humans and the wyverns, it's pretty clear that that relationship is not on the greatest of terms. Obviously, hundreds of years have passed since the war and when the story begins, so who's to say if it's possible for humans and wyverns to mend their relationship? But wyverns don't really want to take that chance out of fear of annihilation. It's also not like humans have access to the wyvern realm anymore, so it's not like they would be able to interact with the remaining wyvern population anyway. Of course, there are select wyverns who have great relationships with specific humans, Raven with Garth and Ungrith with Lawrence, but this is an extremely small sample size that doesn't reflect wyverns' attitudes towards humans at large, although the majority of wyverns hold a lot of respect for Irene, given her ability to learn their language and her efforts to stop the human-wyvern war. Now, on a final note, wyverns themselves don't really have magic, but it's important to note that the wood from the trees that grow within their realm have extremely potent magical properties and are extremely potent ingredients for certain rituals. It's a very similar situation to the sacred trees in the Yggdrasil forest, which is why they need to be very closely guarded. That's all I'll say about that for now. And last but certainly not least, I felt like I couldn't make this video without mentioning the Shadow Knights. While not a race, Shadow Knights are sort of a magical being. It's really more of a class because anyone can become a Shadow Knight. As you will recall from the original series, Shadow Knights originate from the Nether. Following his transformation into the Shadow Lord, Shad knew that he would need an army in order to exact his revenge on Irene, an army that would be entirely loyal to him. And while Imps made for good underlings for smaller tasks, they aren't the best fighters. Like, they're good, but their skill sets made them better suited for recon than for true battle. And so Shad set his sights on the undead. Shadow Knights are immortal warriors who have died and were then reborn in the Nether via a ritual performed by Shad. A Shadow Knight doesn't need to have died in the Nether to be brought back as a Shadow Knight, though it definitely helps. They just need to have died and then be brought back by either Shad himself or another Shadow Knight through the same ritual. Shad's legion of Shadow Knights are predominantly human, but they aren't exclusively human. Shad isn't particularly picky, but it just so happens that because the Shadow Knight system primarily targets guards of lords in Ruan, and Ruan has such a high human population, that most Shadow Knights just so happen to be human. With the original Shadow Knights, Shad really just targeted people who had recently been killed or died and offered them this sort of deal of, I'll bring you back to life, you just need to kill someone close to you and serve me for the rest of eternity. He didn't use those exact words, but that is essentially what he did. But Shad would quickly realize that if he really wanted to hit Irene where it hurt, he should target guards, because guards, by nature of their oaths, were expected to sacrifice themselves for their lords, and those who hadn't died yet were constantly at risk of losing their lives in battle. And so Shad found that many guards, even those who did love and were very loyal to their lords, that they could be convinced to betray their lords in exchange for immortality and enhanced power, especially for the guards who were outright treated as disposable by their lords, which unfortunately was the case for many guards. Over time, hundreds of guards have been corrupted by Shad's influence and undergone the Shadow Knight transformation. Shadow Knights gain immortality and enhanced strength after they have either killed the person closest to them, so for guards, this is usually their lord, or by slaughtering countless civilians in cold blood. A Shadow Knight who has done neither is considered premature. Shadow Knights retain whatever abilities they had while living, so if they were a magics user or a witchcraft user or whatnot, they would retain those abilities in death. Shadow Knights are also able to summon this blood red shell that essentially functions as armor for them. Now, I feel like I don't need to say that Shadow Knights are an enemy to everyone in the world, with them like being the army that serves the Shadow Lord, the literal antagonist of the series, but I will say it anyway, just to cover all my bases. Alright, that is all I have for today's episode of Rewriting Minecraft Diaries. Thank you guys so much for watching. In the next episode, we're going to be talking about Ocassus. This will be the first Ocassus episode. I already know that Ocassus is going to require a couple of episodes to cover everything. I don't know exactly how many yet. I won't know for sure until I finish the Ocassus script, but stay tuned because I'm really excited to talk about Ocassus and some characters that we all know and love, or love to hate. The first Ocassus episode will be coming out in May, like I said in the beginning of this video. I will be uploading other videos and doing some lives and stuff in the meantime. Speaking of which, I will be doing a very exciting live in February to celebrate the 11-year anniversary of my channel, which might have some fun surprises for the series. Maybe some sneak peeks of episodes to come and just some other fun things. So you might want to check it out. It'll be a fun time. I have some fun things planned. I think if you can make it, and obviously I'll have the VOD up, but so if you want to check it out, I think it might be worth it. If you guys have any questions or suggestions or whatnot for this series, leave them down below in the comments. Honestly, I've kind of been lacking on replying to comments, but I will do my very best to respond to people this time. I don't know, I just have kind of been out of it, but I'm trying to get back into it. Once again, that's all I have for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I upload Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, except when I don't, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye, guys.